I'm in the third quarter. You took forever.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sideline Sports. It's your
There you
boy.
go. You started it. There we go. Go ahead.
Welcome to the Sideline Fantasy Podcast here with your boy Crimson and his
Yeah.
sidekick Eric Foreman. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing pretty good. Notre Dame game starts here in a little bit. We're gonna hopefully be the top 4 team in the country after tonight. We're just out there doing what we got to do to, go for a national championship.
If you haven't obviously clued in, it's my show now, so we're gonna do things my way.
Yeah.
We're gonna get into things here quickly. A lot of action on the waiver wire, a lot of trades this week.
Yep. Yep.
A lot of moves in a very key week. Like you said, these last 2 weeks with in-division play were massive because you don't see these guys a second time. But,
Very much
I
so.
mean, people are trying to capitalize on injuries, capitalize on this last in-division game until they kind of go on a little road trip across seas to play that Division 2 over there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, things are looking pretty tight at the top of both divisions. Pretty much the same on both sides, actually, for the most part. So let's get into things and let's start off with trades because we had some biggies.
I'll tell you what, real quick. Looking at the standings too. It's gonna be interesting. No, yeah, keep going, keep going. We'll get to the standings in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about those once we hit on the matchups. But yeah, trades. First of all, apparently you were involved in one, I believe. It wasn't massive, but our boy Dave, aka Fear the Herbinator, aka the worst name in fantasy football history, made a couple of moves. He
He
lost.
did.
He lost Austin
What's
Eckler.
with that new name too? That is
I
awful.
I don't know, man. I mean,
That's awful.
people might fear him down the road. I mean, he's got a promising, he's in a promising situation where he can kind of strive, and you've got the pieces there
Uh,
for sure. But
is it better than play that guitar to a W at least? Is it a little bit
I
better than
mean,
that? Because that was awful
I'm
too.
gonna say yes because no one's playing a guitar for at least 4 to 6 weeks.
Right. At least. And not only that,
Go
but I
ahead.
feel like he's taking a little bit of my Schwarbinator nickname and using it for Herbie, and I don't like that.
I mean,
Schwarby's my boy, but
I, I would take that as some sort of compliment just because he likes it so much. But he's attaching it to a guy who's played in a total of, I believe, 3 games now.
0 and
So
3.
we'll see about that.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously this trade, Judy. So basically, it was Judy for Lindsay.
I think you're skipping your. Is that from last time? No, yeah, it was last. That was last week. So yeah, it was Judy for Lindsay. Yes, that was Dave and Jay.
What do you think of that one? So Lindsay's going to go back. He's going to be getting some action again. Melvin Gordon's played pretty well though. Do we see Lindsay continuing his kind of role here? Who do you like this trade for? Because upside is possibly Judy might be the number one receiver there right now too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's pretty even. If I had to break it down as such, it can go both ways. As you know, they're if the Broncos are down, obviously they're going to toss the ball a lot, so Judy gets more targets that way. But in the beginning of games and game script wise, might kind of lean towards Lindsay being more of the value here, just because with your quarterback Drew Lock not back yet, I believe there's a chance he might play this week or something like that. He's close though, so he's close to coming back either way. At least this week with Rippy and likely playing, you don't want to have to go out and have that guy sling the ball, 30, 40 times, although last week he showed he can do that. How efficiently it was, that to be seen, but he can go out there and he can give you a decent game. But with Lindsay coming back, I feel like you don't want to work in Melvin too much, just because if you guys, make a push for the playoffs or whatever, I doubt this team kind of is in a position to do so as it stands. But you just want to see what you have out of these guys. Lindsay's kind of somebody who you can't really just disregard at all. He may not be 100%.
Running backs are at a premium. We're noticing it's
then
hard to get running
that's
backs.
the thing. You can get any running back in any sort of trade, as long as they have value. I'm likely going to side with that trade with that side of things, unless the return is just to the point where it overshadows the need for running backs. Like everybody, no matter what, we see it week in and week out. I would like to get an RB2. I'd like to get another running back on my squad. Like everyone is every week is looking for another running back.
Right. And I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Denver for Denver there. The injuries obviously have hurt Denver quite a bit this year, but they do have some talent. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of role Lindsey has with Gordon kind of stepping up, but also Judy possibly being that number one. That could be big as well. What about the next one here? Keenan, again, Herbinator, Dave, in it with Dana this time. They pulled the trade off. Keenan Allen and Deontay Johnson is going to go to Dave, and Juju and Darius Slayton, a pair of receivers. So it's trading a pair of receivers for a pair of receivers, both of two Pittsburgh receivers involved. And Dave, of course, gets his boy, Keenan Allen. What did you think of this trade and how it looks for Dave and Dana?
Well, first of all, I think this is just Dave trying to recoup some Charger love
Stay alive.
and stay alive. Yeah, but he relied on the Charger boys heavily. At some point in time, we knew Keenan Allen end up on Dave's roster, whether he had to give an arm, a leg,
Firstborn
a
child.
testicle, firstborn child, two brand new cars.
Yeah.
There was going to be a time and place where Keenan Allen was on
Gonna
Dave's
be on his team, yeah.
as
You
long
basically draft him knowing you're gonna get more value.
yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
that's kind of how things work.
did it last year.
Yeah, I did it last year, and it just, I mean, at some point in time, he's gonna come calling. So you're gonna either hold on to him or whatever. At some point in time, you'll get something for him. But the trade here to me is kind of, again, I look at it very balanced. Like, I like Juju, I like Keenan. Both are pretty solid players. Both are in offenses where they're targeted a decent amount. Keenan more so than Juju, but to me, it's the second piece that gives somebody an edge, and I like the edge more so with Dana, with Darius Slayton, with no Barkley. We've seen Darius Slayton and Daniel Dimes connect multiple times throughout last year when the receiving core was kind of stifled with injuries, and with no Barkley, like, you're gonna have to have somebody give you some sort of offense. Daniel Dimes trusts Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton has shown in the past that he can give you multiple touchdown games for stretches of weeks. So that's kind of end all be all for the trade in regards to value for me. So I feel like Dana kind of got the better end of this.
Yeah, and also you got to think that, Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't been great so far this year, but he's been pretty solid. He's getting the touchdowns. He's not quite getting the yards, but if he's kind of hopefully proving last year's awful season he had was a fluke. And if that has been a fluke, this trade really might help Dana quite a bit. We'll see, because as you said, he's basically getting two number one receivers in this trade in Slayton and Juju, while Dave, on the other hand, is getting a definite number one receiver in Keenan, who's played really well to this point, and Deontay Johnson. But as we will see when we get to Dave's team, he's going to be loaded on a certain team again, as we mentioned. But next trade up, nothing too crazy. Defense for defense. Anything in particular there other than the fact that you don't remember the rules?
Oh, I remember the rules. Just the fact that it looks fishy at 6 a.m. in the morning or 7 or in the morning, or whatever. So
you
there
just
was
forgot
that.
the rules, Crimmy. You already had a C+ for the show. You forgot how the rules went a little bit.
Just, I guess, a question for you. Knowing what you knew going into that, I mean, it was on the 8th, and today is now the 10th, so you kind of had an idea.
Yeah.
Did you kind of make this move in regards to the future, or did you not take into consideration that Stephon Gilmore may not be out on the field for 3 weeks?
It still doesn't bother me. I think the Patriots' defense is still really good, and they've had 2 double-digit point weeks already. And I also know that a good part of why Dana's team last year was so good, not only did he have the players, he had the defense. And that Patriots defense would routinely get him 15 to 20 a week. And honestly, they're still the number 4 defensive fantasy this year. So I know they're on a bye next week. I'm going to have to make a decision there, but the Patriots defense is still really good. So I know Gilmore might not play this week, but they're also playing Denver, and I could kind of see that being an ugly 20 to 14 game. So I don't think their defense is even a bad play this week.
Fair enough.
And then the last trade, right, Krim? We got, again, Dave involved. Herbinator, he is going to give Julio Jones, who he's been kind of dangling all season, waiting for the right value, and Eric Ebron, who at this point so far in the year has been tight end number 26, but had a good game last week, his first good one of the year. And it's going to be traded from you, Devin Singletary, who has been, again, kind of dangled all year, but you've been a big fan of his, and Zach Ertz, who you just got last week. He had 1 game on your team, and he's gone. What was your thought doing this trade? What was going through your head?
More so, it was just the fact that I wanted Julio.
And
It's
you've been
somebody.
hesitant to make trades this year.
Yeah,
You've been very hesitant.
I've liked who my team is. It was more so a move where, for starters, I thought that Devin wouldn't play this week. So I kind of felt like if I'm going to sit him anyways, I might as well try to get somebody I think that can kind of push me over the hump in regards to Julio Jones, who also may not play this week. So kind of Dave is likely going to try to move him if he's not going to play for another week, and Dave needs a
He
win.
needs a win. Yeah.
So kind of a little bit of that, but also my team now hopefully is coming back healthy. So I'm going to get back Chris Godwin. I'm getting back Raheem Mostert, who I'm a big fan of. I'm definitely going to ride him out with my as my RB2 for the rest of the year as long as he's good to go. Um, so Devin was kind of a piece I could move. Julio, to me, if you can sit there and tell me that your receiving core with no bye weeks is going to be DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, now your flex will be Chris Godwin, and I don't have to think about it anymore. I mean, that's kind of no matter what the matchup, those guys are pretty much matchup proof. Where I'm going to put them in and just let the thing ride. Like that's kind of at the point where I am now with my team. So the move here was I feel like solid. Ertz obviously was a piece I didn't want to give up for the most part, but Dave essentially gave me an ultimatum that this is the trade that's going to happen or nothing will happen. I'm okay with giving up Ertz as long as Ebron kind of can keep up with what he was doing last week. But also in hindsight, he has no bye week. So I don't have to actually go out and get another tight end to fill a bye week because his bye week is last week. And as long as he's good to go, he sits there as well.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because if you really think about it, this is a trade kind of full of underish performers so far. I don't think Singletary's been underperformer, but I think a little bit of people thought he'd be a little bit higher than running back 17 to this point. He hasn't been bad, especially his last 2 weeks. He's gotten 14 and 16. But in terms of Ertz and in terms of Julio, obviously underperformers, right? Whether it's injuries or just not getting the reps and kind of the looks that they're used to getting, and that's been Ertz so far. 9 yards last week. Uh, he had another game this year with 18 yards. He only has one score, so his volume has been a little worrisome, especially when he's been a 100 catch tight end in the past. So I do see where the floor of that trade works for you is if Julio comes back in an offense that's going to throw 45 times a game and he remains healthy the rest of the year. I definitely think you could come out on top with this trade. But I do like the names of Ertz and Singletary a little bit more, because you might be struggling at tight end again here soon. Ebron had one good game. Can he keep it up? We'll see. But that's kind of where I'm at with that one. But if Julio can come back, be healthy, and be a top 5 fantasy receiver, I think you got that one in the bag there. But let's go to the matchups, Krim. First matchup is going to be you, right? Nuke Jukum, you're going against your brother. We got a little bit of cannibalism here. He really needs a win, and you lost your first one last week. How do you feel about this matchup?
I'm feeling pretty good, especially when you jumped over the point that people added players this week. We're
Oh yeah.
skipping waivers completely. I get
Oh
it.
crap. Yeah. What are well we won't go through them all. What are some big waivers you saw this week?
The
What are some
biggest
big
ones we
points?
saw this week were Justin Jackson going to Dave. Again, another Charger boy with 35 points.
Did he have to spend that much, do you think?
No, I feel like Dave wanted to just secure,
Needed him?
a piece of that offense again, and he thinks that
He's
Justin
gonna get
Jackson
some
may
carries.
yeah, he'll get touches, but that last year he's kind of reaching into last year. Jackson got touches when Eckler was being spelled. Kelly wasn't there. Kelly is now there. So we'll see what happens with Jackson. He may get some, decent amount of work to be viable, but is it somebody you'll play every week? Probably not. And
And
on the
the
yeah, go
and there
ahead.
was another one that was high priced too, if I'm not correct. Which one was
Yeah,
the other high
that
priced one?
was the Ernest Johnson, running back for the Cleveland Browns, who Jay scooped up.
And he paid a lot for him too.
Yeah, 33 waiver points.
And he looked pretty. I actually watched when he came in the game. He actually looked pretty productive. He was getting a lot of touches. Now, Kareem Hunt, without a doubt, I do think is the number one. But does Ernest Johnson kind of fall into the Kareem Hunt role of old? And I think that's kind of where Jay's getting at with this one. Again, running backs are a premium, hefty budget price. That's a third of your budget. Do you like it, or was it a little too pricey for you?
I think it's a little too pricey for me. I mean, I guess for someone like Jay who's already 3-1, you don't really have to worry about, you're not fighting for your life at this point. So if you're giving up some points, you just kind of want to make sure you get somebody like this just to see what he can do for your team, even if you don't play him every week. It's not awful, but I just don't see him being the Kareem Hunt to Kareem Hunt. I don't see him coming in and getting, 10 carries, catching the ball 6 times. Like Kareem will do that still. I think that this offense will turn more so now to its passing game, where Odell gets involved, where Landry gets involved, where Hooper gets involved, where Njoku's coming back, where he gets involved more. I think they're going to rely on those guys more, not a lot more, but more to where it cuts into Dearness Johnson's kind of value. So 33 points to me is a bit much, but at the same time, coming from a team that's top their division right now, isn't a bad move either.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes those when you're at a good record like that, and you can possibly get a running back of that, and he turn into anything. That could even improve your team even more. So definitely something to look at there. Some other small ones: Teddy Bridgewater for 11. Justin paid for a quarterback there who's been looking pretty good so far in Carolina. And then you did Patrick at 8. Chad Fellers can't go without Madison on his team, and he spent 5 there. But now let's go to the matchups. We got you and your brother. Chop Squad, Nukem Jukem. He desperately needs a win. You lost your first one last week. Projections say this one between brothers is going to be close, but they actually have Trey as a 7-point favorite right now. Probably a lot to do with Deshaun Watson playing Jacksonville. But honestly, I don't like his matchups as much. Brandon Cooks has been awful. He's still not been good. Every new team he goes to, we think he's going to be good. He's going to do something. He's been awful. Robbie Anderson's been okay, but Jonathan Taylor's going to get a lot of carries. That I think really that Cleveland Indianapolis game is going to be the difference. Hunt and Taylor for him. You got Mozart back against Miami. You got Zeke against the Giants. That's a good matchup there. Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins against the Jets. I like that matchup there. You're projected to lose by 7. I don't think you will. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had bad matchups. Obviously, it might change, depending on if Julio is going to play. Um, that kind of changes things, a decent amount. But I don't think that the projections are necessarily going to tell the tale here. I know a lot of time you can see that just on paper, but I think this game will be close for sure. Obviously, I can't tell you who I, think is going to win because it's me involved. I think it's going to be me every time. But
Oh yeah, okay, okay. We're getting cocky now. Let's
I do
go.
like my matchups. I do like his
Yeah,
for the most part too.
speak the
So
truth. Let's
it'll be
go.
close.
Yeah, and your brother needs a win this week too. I beat him last week. He fell to 1-3. He has lost 3 games in a row now. The running back injuries sure do not help. He would have been more in the game last week, obviously. If he that was, I think last week was the first week he didn't start Kareem Hunt, because of Jonathan Taylor's kind of emergence. But maybe it's not. But Josh Jacobs against KC, that's another interesting one. Can Las Vegas hang in the game where Josh Jacobs is used a lot? I had Josh Jacobs last year, and he was great for me. But there's games that Oakland got down in, and he was out of that game plan pretty quickly. So you better hope he can keep that game close. I don't know if Josh Jacobs is in line for a 20-point performance here. We'll see. Next matchup is who?
We've got again you back to back and back again, but he's actually just back to the win column with 1, and the
Yeah,
Pistol Pete's platoon.
you got to start somewhere, Krim. You got to start somewhere. I got my first win, and this week might even be bigger. Peter is 2-2, coming off 2 losses in a row. Can't feel good about that. While I, on the other hand, won my first game and projected for a decent point total this week. Derrick Henry's back, so I'm 1-0 without Derrick Henry. And next week I play Dave, who's a little bit in shambles. So I need this win, and I think Peter feels like he needs this win, having lost 2 in a row as well. The matchup's gotten off to a start with Peter's defense, the Bears getting him 6. And I feel pretty okay with the Bears defense getting 6. It's not, anything crazy. I can roll with that. But what did you think based on matchups and what you're seeing? Who's got the edge here?
It's tough because again, I like to look at running backs for the most part. Peter's side of things is very difficult just because you're playing the Patriots against the Broncos. Yeah, Melvin Gordon has been fine against most teams, but that's a pretty tough matchup on Monday, which kind of helps him with him capping that out. If Melvin kind of goes off and does his thing, he's got 2 guys in that game, and you have the defense, which could be massive in regards to fantasy, which is the obvious. But I like your side of things on running back wise, like Henry obviously coming back. Hopefully, since they haven't really been able to practice a lot, that they're good to go. I mean, people are going to be okay keeping themselves in shape, but just kind of getting back into the speed of the game and stuff. Maybe that week off, unexpected week off, kind of throws it off. But I mean, it's Derrick Henry, so I feel like he'll be fine. The big thing here is for you is Darrell Henderson. I mean, with Akers now coming back, Malcolm Brown still being there, Darrell Henderson being there, like what's the workload for these guys? Like it's kind of you're now playing with fire, not playing with fire, but now you're getting into that whole Patriot style of committee where no one wants to touch one of the guys, and then you end up playing the wrong one, or you play the right one and you're having a great time. You play the wrong one, you're having a bad time. I mean, getting yourself into that situation isn't the greatest thing in the world, but you're kind of hoping at that point your guy comes out on top. Receiver wise, I like Peter's team probably on that side just because Cooper and McLaurin have good matchups. McLaurin might struggle actually. Again, you're playing the Rams, which aren't great. The matchup there is never really fantastic, but the the football team is going to throw the ball a lot
Way to
because they're
go,
going to be
Grim.
playing from
Jesus.
behind.
D plus.
But again, this week you have Kyle Allen playing. So how much will that affect Scary Terry playing with a quarterback he's not necessarily used to playing with because Allen joined the team in the offseason? And how much will that affect kind of his stock at that point too? I mean, it's someone who Peters relied on week in and week out. hasn't
McLaurin's been
hasn't
good.
faltered
He's
him.
been getting a lot of
He's been
targets
good.
too.
That's what
Yeah.
I mean. So like, do they kind of go away from that? Does it then help you on the other side with Antonio Gibson because Kyle Allen wants to trust his running back more and dump it off? Like that to me is pretty massive in its own right. Oh
Yeah,
no, I mean the teams they're pretty balanced.
yeah, I think you've kind of hit it on the head. I actually really like his receiver matchups, Cooper and McLaurin. I think both of them can have big games. Washington might find themselves down early in that one, throwing the ball a lot. And that might help my matchup with Gibson as well, because again, former receiver, he's been getting a lot of catches this year. But I think the running back situation, as good as Gordon and Sanders are, I think they might get held up a little bit this week against Pittsburgh and New England. We'll see. New England can usually take out a piece of an offense very well and make them rely on something else. I have a feeling New England might try to shut down Melvin Gordon at that running game and force Denver to throw the ball. But on the other end, I don't really know what to do at receiver. It's tough this week with Galladay on a bye, Landry going against that Indianapolis defense. I've kind of been fiddling around with who to start. I kind of like the Lamar Jackson matchup against Cincy. I think Marquise Brown can finally break free and have a 100-yard touchdown game. But the other one against Tennessee, John Brown, we'll see. And Cole Beasley's been getting targets this year, so I just don't want to start the wrong one. I agree with the Henderson situation, though, but I think LA might get up early on them and pound the rock a lot, and I think Henderson might get those carries, but we'll see. Um, but yeah, last week kind of gave me room for pause again with that situation. I'm not starting Gaskin against San Fran. San Fran's number one against running back so far in fantasy. Otherwise, in the weeks ahead, Gaskin could get that role over Henderson, but we'll see. I need the win. Peter needs the win. It'll be a close one. Gotham City Rogues and Seafells is the next one, correct?
Yeah, we got a big game already on Thursday for Chad as he played Ronald Jones, who didn't surprise. He had a very good game with 106 yards, 19 receiving yards, gave him 14. And surprise, surprise, Allen Robinson at it again with 90 yards. Another 14-point week for him. He's been pretty good for that Chicago Bears team. Was 4-1. Who knows why? But here we are.
Yeah, for real. I think he'll take two 14-point performances. I don't think those are bad. He's got 28 to this point. Great matchup with Dak Prescott against the Giants. Joe Mixon should get a lot of carries and touches against Baltimore, especially with the game he had last week. DJ Moore, that Atlanta-Carolina game might be high scoring. DJ Moore's looked pretty good this year. And again, Dak Prescott's got targets. He's throwing for 500 yards a game, and Gallup is sure to get involved somewhat. So I do like Chad's matchups, especially with the start he's had so far. But Jay is still projected to win. We'll see about that Big Ben matchup on Philly. Cooper Kupp against Washington should be decent. The Minnesota defenses look bad. Lockett should be interesting. This might be one of the higher scoring matchups of the week, and maybe the 14 each from Jones and Robinson won't be enough for Seafells. Both teams have decent matchups here.
Yep, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at things on both sides. I like pieces on either side, and I don't like some on other sides. I mean, obviously, I really like the Lockett matchup against Minnesota. George Kittle had a fantastic week last week against, I forgot who they played again, on Thursday against Denver, I believe, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Philly, sorry. It was Philly. It was Ertz and Kittle on whatever game it was. It was stupid because he absolutely killed me last week. But that's also fine. I mean, that's what Kittle does. So I will respect it for what it is. But at the same time, too, I don't necessarily think I like, Diggs against Tennessee. That's going to be a tougher game for sure. Tennessee's defense isn't, a push around by any means. And I don't know about this. Again, we've spoken about it before, but this quarterback running back tandem with Roethlisberger and Connor, where they don't really link up much. I mean, those guys aren't, a Breeze, a Kamara, a Teddy, and a McCaffrey. Hell, even like Nick Foles and David Montgomery that we saw on Thursday. Though they don't really kind of throw the ball to Connor much, so you're dipping your toes into both sides of things. But it's not often that both sides kind of explode for fantasy, weeks for you. So that kind of something to kind of keep your eye on. And for Chad, the biggest thing here, it's kind of plain and simple. Joe Mixon. He had a fantastic week last week. Balled out. Everyone was on Joe Mixon's crumb and absolutely loved him. They're like, he's great. We love him. He's back, baby.
Love him.
Decision picking him, and now he's playing Baltimore, where he'll probably get you maybe 10 points, and you're gonna kind of be upset a little bit because last week he gave you like 30, so you're gonna kind of have to lower your expectations there. But that could hurt you. I mean that's a situation where that team can get behind. Joe Mixon isn't really involved in the pass game much, so he could his ceiling is kind of low at that point. And the guys he has following him, I mean, DJ Moore hasn't been fantastic up to this point for whatever reason. Robbie Anderson's kind of cutting back production. I think he'll still. This is kind of a get right game for DJ, playing a softer Atlanta secondary, so you can kind of rely on that more so. But again, anything Tennessee for me is kind of iffy. I take it with a grain of salt, just because this team hasn't practiced much. They weren't around each other a lot. I mean, they weren't supposed to be, but they were. It's just a matter of, can these guys kind of get back to where they were prior to everything happening and kind of just keep rolling. Because Jonnu Smith, again, before everything happened, had a great game, had that week off. Now he's coming back. Is he going to give Chad that production again? I mean, it's kind of all up in the air for that. But his X factor obviously is Gallup and Prescott to me. If those guys can connect often, it's going to be a very good week for those two. But like you said, Prescott has so many weapons. He has CD, he has Amari, he has Gallup, he has Schultz. He's got that Wilson boy who exploded, 2-3 weeks ago. He's got Zeke still in the backfield to kind of feed the ball to. He's got so many pieces to play with that it's hard to kind of, again, pick the right one. You're going to take shots either way because week in and week out these guys can do those things, and you're likely going to get a decent game from everybody. But you kind of want to pick and choose and make sure you have that one guy who explodes for 100 of those 500 yards and that touchdown out of the 3 or 4 he throws every week. So hopefully for Chad's sake, he can get that. But again, it's kind of like playing the lottery. You're kind of just hoping that it is you.
Yeah, it's crazy to think we're in week 5 or whatever, and we have Mark Ingram sitting on his bench. Who would have thought his role would have been really what it is? I know there was rumors of it, but it's crazy. And we got a 2-2 matchup with Chad, and again 3-1 with Jay. Jay's won 3 in a row, riding a win streak. Chad's won 2 in a row, riding a win streak. And being 3-2 coming out of those 5 games feels a lot better than being 2-3. And I'm sure for Jay, he could be 4-1 if he wins this one, looking really good. I like this team a lot in the beginning of the season. But moving on to the next matchup here, going to the other division. And I've mentioned this in the chat this week, but every game in this division is a same record matchup. 1-3 versus 1-3, 2-2 versus 2-2, and 3-1 versus 3-1. So we could see a lot of swings this week in the division. Dave, 0-3, just like your brother, or sorry, 1-3, but just like your brother has lost 3 in a row, going against Kyle, who's also 1-3, who lost last week. Kyle's got 16.8 points thanks to his defense and Jimmy Graham. I'll be honest though, Dave's team with the trades doesn't look too bad. Herbert, a Gurley Singletary backfield, a Keenan Allen, Tyler Boyd, Zach Ertz pass catching, the number 1 receiver in Denver. I don't mind Dave's lineup this week. I think he's done an all right job kind of reassembling his team. He is going to go Herbert over Drew Brees again. We'll see how that works out. But let's see. What do you think of this matchup?
Again, I like pieces on both sides. I'm not too sure about how they'll play out necessarily, but there's Dave's team is looking a lot different, obviously, from the trades he's made. It does look a lot better from the trades he's made, but I do like Kyle's side of things more so with just looking at the running backs and wide receivers. Yeah, they're from the same teams, but those matchups are very good in playing the Jaguars against Houston and the Raiders up against Kansas City. I mean, you've got the high-powered offense in KC with Edward Hilaire, with Tyreek Hill. Like, again, there's not a lot of mouths to feed there, but there's a lot to go around, and it's just a matter of, who gets involved. Those guys are heavily involved for the most part, so it's kind of, you can rely on them very, very easily. And James Robinson, man, he's been a surprise.
Right.
I don't
Very
think
good.
people expected him to be as good as he is. I mean, obviously the Jaguars did. They kind of let Fournette go for him. But
Right.
fantasy wise, like when you're the kind of the guy scoring the touchdowns. There's really nobody kind of eating up goal line carries. There's nobody kind of shooting into any sort of carries in general. That's pretty rare to see.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that KC Las Vegas game goes. That's a big one for Kyle with having Hilaire and Tyreek Hill. And again, riding two Jaguars with Robinson and Shark. We'll see how that works out. And he's been playing quarterback roulette, Krim. Kirk Cousins this week. He's done a Stafford. He's done Fitzpatrick. He's done a lot of different guys so far. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how this week will look for him. But he is going to ride the Kirk Cousins train against Seattle this week. Only 13% of people own Kirk Cousins. That'll be an interesting matchup. But again, both teams looking for a win in that division. They don't want to fall any more behind. Both teams at 1-3. Next matchup is the Brady Bunch, Dana, 2-2 versus Justin, the Bare Necessities, at 2-2 as well. Both teams coming off a win last week. Justin not projected for even 100 points this week, though. Mike Evans got him 12.6. I'm sure he would have liked a little bit more from that, and I'm sure he would have liked a lot more from Leonard Fournette. That's going to be a tough one. He started Fournette. Not sure I would have done that. I know they said he was playing, but I think it was very, very emergency. And I know McKissick wouldn't have been great, but over the last couple of weeks, maybe he could have got 5-6 catches for you just to give you something. But the way it's looking right now, throwing up a goose egg before Sunday and having Mike Evans, one of your biggest playmakers, only get you 12, it's looking a little bit like an uphill battle, especially when Montgomery got Dana 15.5.
Yeah, it's definitely tough when you're trying to combat a running back giving you absolutely zero. Like you said, obviously he was active. Again, I wouldn't have trusted it myself just because it sounded like it was going to be more so for an emergency. I mean, he didn't practice at all during the week. They activated him just because you can't really go without Fournette and McCoy just because you don't really have the roster to do so. You have Keyshawn Vaughn, you have Ronald Jones. Those two guys are great. But if someone were to get hurt again in that game, you have to have somebody who can at least, stand in. You don't have to do anything. You snap the ball, he stands there, doesn't block, and just somebody who's there on the formations, I guess, to kind of provide a decoy of some sorts. But something like that's very hard to kind of come back from. And at the same time, too, with Justin, it's tough because your matchups aren't fantastic either. I mean, you got Teddy. Teddy, he has a great matchup against the Falcons for sure. Kamara is kind of matchup proof at this point. But looking at below, I mean, Higbee's been a hit or miss. He hasn't been fantastic. I mean, he's a top 10 tight end, but you have a week where it's 5.5 week one, you explode with 3 touchdowns or 25.9 points. Then you fall short again with 7 and 3.5 points those next 2 weeks. It's it's tough to kind of get that taste out of your mouth where you've put so much, not capital, but expectations into that person. They fall short 2 weeks in a row. And if this game gets out of hand early on, which we think it's going to, he won't be involved as much as you think he's going to be. So it's going to be tough to kind of, again, get those points back that you missed with Fournette and your flex. I mean, AJ Green, it's kind of upsetting to see with this team, with this quarterback. Everybody at the beginning of the year was Burrow's going to rejuvenate AJ. Everyone, AJ's hyped, Burrow's hyped. They love each other. But now we've seen AJ kind of fall off. I mean, you have T. Higgins taking that role of AJ. You have Boyd taking that role of the true number one, which he was last year without AJ. And it's tough to play somebody like that, especially against a Baltimore Ravens secondary, where yes, balls will be thrown. Burrow will throw the ball probably 60 times again. But how effective will he be against a secondary like that? And how often will those balls go to AJ? Like it's there's so many factors here to look at, and just those players don't really have high ceilings, but they have very low floors. So if you're gonna get that floor play from those guys, like the projections say you're under 100 points, I don't think it's even wrong at that point. It's gonna be very hard for Justin to win this matchup.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is AJ Green wasn't in a lot of the second half last week. Even though Burrow for a third straight game has thrown for 300 yards. It's not like Burrow's thrown for 150, 160 and struggling and getting shut down. Burrow's thrown for a lot of yards, and it's not going to AJ Green at all. So that's what's kind of interesting about that situation. And he wasn't in a lot in the second half. Justin, the third highest scoring team in the league, is possibly facing a 2-3 record. It's crazy. It really is. Going to the last matchup here, it's the kind of prime matchup of the week. Tyler Robb. The score's projected to be within a point. 3-1 versus 3-1. Tyler suffering his first loss last week. Robb, winner of 2 in a row. No matchups have gone underway yet, but based off what you see on paper, who are you liking more in this one? It's projected to be real close. And the winner of this one might come out as best team in the league. Right there with you if you win yours. It's going to be, we'll see.
I'm going to correct you on one thing. You said no players have played yet. Yet Rob had Scotty Miller give him a total of
wow.
absolutely
That's
nothing on
another
Thursday,
goosey.
and that is
That's
massive to me.
another goosey.
Outside of
Wow.
this, however, the matchups to me are very. That's why the projections are crazy. They're very mirrored, man. Like Mahomes against a weak Raiders defense, who again held their own against Breeze, 2 weeks ago. So that's massive. It's Mahomes though, so I feel like that offense is different. You don't have Kamara and then Traquan. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Tyreek, then Kelsey and Mahomes on his own, moving around back there. Like it's different. It's just a different look entirely. But on the other side of things, you have Russell playing that weak Minnesota secondary, who's been absolutely cooking up. So that right there is a big matchup in its own right. Drop down one. What do you got there? You got question mark, question mark. What is Malcolm Brown going to do? Will he get carries? Yes. Will he be effective with those carries? Who knows? Because this running back committee, there's 3 guys who are capable of running the ball who will get touches. Is the hot hand being ridden at this point? Probably. But when you get Akers back now this week, is this a game where you kind of give him the rock and say, hey, young blood, we're up. Just get your feet underneath you again. Here's the ball more often than not. And Malcolm Brown can take the backseat at that point because they know what they have in Malcolm Brown. They don't really need to kind of let him get his feet wet when he's already been in the game and shown that he has taken the lead off for the first game. And they gave it to Akers. He got knocked out, so then things changed. And on Rob's side of things here, Freeman, same thing. It's somebody who is going to give opportunities for sure. The offense is likely going to be in a shootout. So how much is he going to be involved? Like that to me is a very big question mark for both those guys. Carson Cook, you can essentially just cross them out as both balanced, both playing in the same game, which is great. Which is we'll see which running back kind of prevails from there. Dalvin Cook has been fantastic, and so is Carson.
I mean, if it's not plain and simple that Minnesota Seattle game's huge. I mean, Rob's got Russell Wilson, but Tyler's got DK Metcalf, who's been his best target by far so far on the season. I mean, if you really look at DK Metcalf's line right now, he basically has 400-yard games. He's averaging 100 yards a game with almost a touchdown a game right now. His first 2 weeks he had 95 and 92 yards. The last 2 weeks he's been over 100. So does DK Metcalf kind of balance out that matchup? Also, like you said, Carson and Cook, same game. Robert Woods and Malcolm Brown on Tyler's side is an interesting one. I think they're going to score a lot of points in that game. Does Malcolm Brown and Robert Woods, are they part of that? CeeDee Lamb, again, someone else in another New York Giant Dallas game, while Rob's got Devontae Freeman. Does he get more work this week? So, going to be interesting. Oh, again, Tyler with Patrick Mahomes and Rob with Kelsey. So there's going to be a lot of that back and forth this week where you're rooting for this, but don't really want him to catch it type of stuff going on in this matchup. And the winner of it will get to 4-1 on the year and kind of take control there. So that kind of wraps up our look at the preview matchups. Again, looking at the divisions right now, we got Jay up in top in Division 1 at 3-1. Crimson right there tied at 3-1 as well with just 20 less points. Seafell's hanging in at 2-2. Seafell's winner of 2 in a row at 2-2. Peter loser of 2 in a row at 2-2. And now you have me at 1-3, Trey at 1-3. On the other side, you have Tyler 3-1, Rob 3-1, Justin, Dana 2-2, and Kyle and Dave 1-3. A lot of big matchups in Division 2 this week. Any last words before we finish up here, Crimmy?
Yeah, I just want to touch on that last matchup again. That Rob and Tyler matchup could be decided. It's really weird to me by the defense, just because Tyler's playing that Broncos defense against a really weird kind of weakish offense in New England, and Rob's playing this Steelers defense against a kind of weird, weakish Philadelphia offense. So those things are really the only difference in these teams, because they're pretty much have somebody on both sides of each game that they're rooting for, like you said. So that could be very weird if that becomes the case, but also that's fantasy, so it does not surprise me. Outside of that, however, not really. I mean, again, this is one of the biggest weeks for us fantasy boys,
Yeah,
and
week 5.
I guess girls if we had Tori in this league. But week 5 is massive, man. Like it can change things
All kinds of
very
momentum.
quickly,
Yeah.
and you don't really have the ability to kind of change them back or kind of redeem yourself until late in the season. The trade deadline, I believe, is week 8 or week 10?
I think it's 9 or 10.
9. So it is, so we've got a couple games to play still, but that's approaching quicker than you know it. I mean, we're already more than halfway there now at this point. If your teams are kind of in need of something, coming out of your divisional play is where you stand. You're playing those guys, two of those guys a second time, or three of them second time. So you're going to kind of need to see what happened last time. Where
2.
your team, it's a 2.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just 2.
It makes 2. So again, you're going to need to kind of figure out what you need. Playing those guys again is going to be big. If you lose a second time to those people,
Right. And that's why I'd argue all those 2-2 teams, like every game's important. Everyone is still in it. Doesn't matter if you're 1-3 or whatever. But those 2-2 teams, man, this week it's a very big swing. Saying, hey, through the first 5 weeks of division play, I came out on top. I'm 3-2. Or you lose, and crap, out of division play, I came out 2-3. It's tough, right? Like you don't want to be the 2-3. You want to get that win this week. It's a big week. After this week, like you said, we go cross division, and right now Division 2 is looking good. They have 3 teams that have scored 500 points. We have 0 in our division. So Division 2, we'll see. When we always get into those division battles of who's better, it'll be interesting to see who wins this one. Any
yeah, I
last
mean,
thoughts?
yeah,
Like
you said it's going to get tougher from here. We can't really make up a lot of leeway here, but at the same time, these matchups are probably the biggest we have. I mean, the 2-2 guys are facing off against 3-1 guys. The 1-3 guys are playing 2-2 guys. So like the way it looks now, obviously it can be said the same way for every week, but the way the division is laid out right now and the way it looks can swing so much going into next week. And not that the other games don't really matter, because they matter, but you're kind of not fighting with those divisional people. You're playing other teams. You're crossing over, so you're kind of playing teams that could be weaker. But for the Division 2 guys who are scoring 500 plus points, maybe they're looking at us like, yeah, those guys aren't putting up a lot of points. If I'm Rob or I'm Tyler, I'm sitting at 4-1 after my matchup. These are the weeks that you can be looking very good. You can make a big move, a big move with someone who's on the lower end of the stick, and kind of solidify your team for the rest of the time. So these next, I think, 3 weeks are the biggest weeks of fantasy football in regards to hitting that deadline, not being able to make any moves, locking your roster in for the playoffs, looking at that playoff schedule. You're sitting at 4-1, 5-1. You're like, I'm looking pretty good. I'm taking the Kyle approach now, and I'm looking at playoff schedules. At this point, not week 2, but I'm looking at playoff schedules. I'm finding those juicy boys who got those juicy matchups, and I'm targeting
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah.
a lot of players can be moved. I feel like there will be some trades. People will be more active in regards to that. Dave, I feel like is probably. I'm going to hope that he's finished. Probably not. I mean, if he loses this week and he's 1-4, I feel like he's just going to feel very defeated. But I do feel like other people at the top part of things were Jay, with Rob, with
Yeah.
Tyler,
Yeah, like I said,
Justin.
we talk about the 2-2 teams, those
Yeah.
1-3 teams. Not that again, even a loss this week doesn't put anybody out, but they also are desperate for a win. Dave, with all the injuries he's had, could really use a win this week. So, a lot of those 1-3 teams, me, myself, and I, right? I win. I'm 2-3. I'm right there. I feel good, going into the matchup next week against Dave. But we'll see. But it's getting
Yep.
to that point, like you said, teams are gonna start separating a little bit, and we'll
Just
see
got
if the trades
just got to
happen.
remember, man. That you take it week by week. You might be 1-4. You might be 2-3. Wherever you're at. We saw a champion come out at 6-8. As long as you get
Darn
into
right.
the dance, you got a chance. So
Got a chance. That's why I had to have fun. I'm just kidding. Kyle's gonna like that one. Kyle will find that one fun. That's why I had to have fun. All right. Anyway, good joining you guys. It's been fun. It's week 6. Fantasy football. It's fun stuff. Hopefully you guys have a good week this week, unless you are, of course, the team I'm playing. So don't do good, Peter. Sorry, buddy. And we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.